Welcome to the podcast where I invite you on a journey to explore meaning, vulnerability, and purpose through the lens of a life lived in geekdom. I'm David Montieth, and I am the Naked Geek. Welcome to the Naked Geek, and once more, thank you for joining me in the boudoir. Today, I am so very excited because I've got my best friend of many years in the boudoir here to share his journey. And part of the reason I'm excited to interview this guy is to kind of correct my perceived injustices of the world. This guy gave me a manuscript many years ago, and I kind of groaned inwardly, and then I read it and went, this is brilliant. And it was called Fallen Heroes, and it was the first novel in his Unseen Shadows universe. And I absolutely loved it. The second book is out. The third book is still being worked on. He went on to have it optioned for TV. There's a Choose Your Own Adventure, a computer game, an audio book. It was adapted for comics, and he's had multiple comics kind of expand his world, which he's folded back into the canon of his universe, and lots of short stories out there. Oh my word, it's so prolific and it's so huge. And he managed to get it into all the Waterstones in the country on his own, without an agent, without any backup. But what he's achieved and the amount of people he's worked with and artists and writers he's had to coordinate, and the publishing and all of that, it's unbelievable. I don't know anyone else who's done that amount of work, that breadth of work, without getting sort of due reverence in the literary world. But anyway, this podcast isn't about my perceived lack of justice in the literary world. It's about celebrating Barry and his process and the things he's had to deal with as he's journeyed to keep his creative juices going and flowing. So without further ado, here's Barry. What's up, B?
Oh, what's up? Oh, so we started now.
We started now. Yeah,
I just come with a what's up, be like, I'm just gonna be like, oh, so we're wrote, so okay, so we're recording, everything's all sorted. Do you know what I mean?
It is. So yeah, this is how our relationship goes, man. Nothing but criticism. There's no positivity in this relationship. How long we've been friends?
I was gonna say, well, you see, we probably got different time frames on that score.
All right. So there's two questions in that. When did we meet?
Okay, so we met 1981.
1980, man.
Was it 80? No,
Yes.
It was 80. I'm getting confused.
September 1980.
Yes, I'm getting confused with when Raiders came out. Yeah, 19. That's like my benchmark for everything. Do you know what I mean?
And so I liked you from the off, man. So what are you saying?
Yeah, well, you know I didn't like you from the off. You know what I mean? You know that.
You know how beforehand I told you that this podcast is going to be about honesty and vulnerability. You didn't have to lean into that quite.
You know what I mean? I thought I've got to support your new venture. So I thought the only way I could do that is to just go like full on in with some deep honesty, some deep seated honesty. So there you go. I was trying to think at what point did I decide that I liked you,
or you had to put up with me.
Yeah, because I think there was quite a lot of putting up with, and then I think that kind of slid into, he's all right, you know.
Oh, damn, man.
And I even think there probably was a moment where I kind of paused in school, did that whole kind of look up like I'm the saint, expected to see a halo. I looked and go, he's all right, you know.
Did you?
You probably had done something annoying and walked off, and I might have cussed you, but I didn't turn to myself, hey, he's all right.
Wow, man. Yeah, well, thanks for that. You know, the Naked Geek's all about honesty. So
there you go, man.
Thanks for that. All right, let's start with you. Let's talk about you. So one of the things I say in the description of this podcast, or in the trailer of the podcast, is that geekdom has been part of my life. You know, it's been a constant companion, you know, depending on how you define that. But for you, how far back did it start? What's the geekiest thing you remember? What's the earliest memory of loving something that we class as geekdom now?
You know, I think it probably was. I think I always have an official answer. People ask me, always go like, you know, Razor Stark or something. But I think it was probably watching the old Republic serials. You know, the Flash Gordon ones.
Oh, Flash Gordon and the other one.
King of the Rocket Men.
King of the
There's another
Rocket
one.
Men.
You know what I mean? Which is basically Rocketeer. Yeah.
Saturday morning black and white stuff.
Yeah, and they used to be on. I think the Flash Gordon ones used to kind of drop on BBC Two at 5:30.
While I remember Flash Gordon really clearly, I don't really remember the Buck Rogers ones.
No, and in some ways, I think the Buck Rogers ones were kind of a bit more pulpy.
Mm.
But these were the ones where they starred, and both Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon starred Larry Buster Crab, and I just loved them. I loved them.
I love the noises the space station makes, man. I feel like it was just someone at a microphone going.
Yeah.
Every time
when they're like in a sort of air battle and they fired something, it was basically like someone throwing a sparkler at someone.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But take that, take it on its face value. Some of the designs especially the designs of the ships, I think to me still hold up today.
I mean, do you think even back then you had an eye for the design of stuff? I mean, didn't you just get lost in the adventure, or was there a real appreciation of the minutiae of it?
I think I think even like back then, I think I was watching like Flash Gordon sort of before I sort of put pen to paper. But I think even back then, I had the kind of eye and a sort of certainly an appreciation for like world building. Like vast worlds. And I think that Flash Gordon series was a real exposure to that. And I kind of think, and obviously I grew up in the 80s, so you had a lot of that shows like Airwolf and stuff like that was going on at the same time. That was kind of
graduating to the Saturday afternoon shows now.
Yeah. But I still think for me, in terms of like you say, where it kind of started for me, I think it was those sort of Flash Gordons, and I think there were other ones was a Zorro one as well, that sort of did it. And at the same time, I was reading like my brother's hand-me-down Marvel comics.
Was there any of those comics that stood out?
I remember one where it was a comic series called The Defenders. And it's not the Defenders as we know them from the Netflix show, although Luke Cage was one of them. But in the actual comics, it was
Hulk was in it, wasn't it?
Yeah, Hulk, Valkyrie, Doctor Strange, Namor, and there was another guy called Nighthawk, and occasionally Silver Surfer or Luke Cage would kind of pop in as like special guest star for like a run, like a story run. And there was one, it was a kind of super powered gang called the Wrecking Crew. Yeah. And there were two sections, and basically they met up with the Defenders, and in classic comic style, first time around they beat down the Defenders, and then they have like a sort of they had like a kind of round two, and the round two there was two bits in that, and one of them was the Hulk. And he was versing a guy, I think he was called Wrecking Ball or something like that. And basically he had a wrecking ball, giant wrecking ball. And he was beating down Hulk. And then what I love back in them days, everything was captions. It was all about the caption boxes. You know what I'm saying? Mm. And there's a bit where and Stan Lee used to talk to you through the captions as well. Yeah, so he used to break the fourth wall. And there's a bit where you see Hulk catch this wrecking ball. And it's about 4 or 5 panels. And as each panel goes, you see him crush the wrecking ball. And then you've got the comments from Stan Lee, and it's going, as every Marvelite knows, the madder Hulk gets, the stronger he gets. And he's very, very mad. And then he crushes it to nothing. And then the final panel is the villain guy, Wrecking Ball or whatever. And you just see him go, he says something like "Sweet Lord" in really small letters, and the next thing he just gets a right hook, man.
Sweet Lord.
And then on the flip side, he had the physical, and he had like a magical one. He had Doctor Strange was versus their leader, and it sounds really cheesy to say the leader had a magic crowbar. That was his. Yeah. It was. But there's a bit where they've both got their hands on the crowbar, and the guy is pushing his power into Doctor Strange, and Doctor Strange is on his knees. He's like, yeah, you see, you can't beat me. Yeah, I'm more powerful than you. And then Doctor Strange kind of gets up and pushes the power back into him. And the guy's like, it's impossible. You can't do this. No one could do this. You're not human. And he just goes, he said, "I'm not human. I'm more than human. I am Doctor Strange. The mystic arts of mine to combine. You're like a child playing with a loaded weapon. Be thankful I did not kill you."
All right. So I'm listening to your reaction. If you could distill for me what it was about that encounter that talked to you as Barry Nugent the kid, and actually talks to you now because I can hear it in your voice.
I think it was weird when you told me about the premise of this, and I was thinking, like, I don't even know how I'm going to even be able to talk about certain things, or whether or not I'll have things in my head. But as I said it, and you asked me the question, straight away it came into my head, and I think it's kind of, my answer runs the gamut through all my life and pretty much everything I've done creatively, and that is to just get back up. That you ain't done yet. You still got fight this. You still got fighting to do. You ain't done yet. And I think when I sort of go back through all of the stuff that I love, whether it's comics, whether it's books, whether it's computer games, whether it's films, TV, the properties that I love most are the ones that really lean into that. Which is probably why I did become such a big fan of Indiana Jones, because it was that. And I would argue with people, do you know what I mean? Indiana Jones isn't a hero. He certainly isn't a hero in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
The other two I could argue, but he's quite a dark character in Raiders of the Lost Ark. You know, he's a mercenary. Really.
I was going to say he's amoral rather than immoral.
Yeah. But what I loved about that character is that he just kept getting back up, no matter what hole he got himself dug into. He was like, "Well, better get a shovel." Do you know? He's just like,
yeah.
He was just forever getting back up. So, and I guess that's kind of that does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And and I thought what was interesting is, like, we talked about it being back then, but how it applies to the rest of your life. So moving forward, I know that for me, I always wondered, what is it about the genre? What is it about science fiction fantasy that I love? Because none of my family or my friends really were into this kind of thing at all. Did you have any encouragement from that at home, apart from David, your eldest brother? Or, I mean, how did we find our way to love this stuff so much when none of our nurture is surrounded by that? Or was it something about, I don't know, for you being the youngest, I don't know, was there something about that?
I think even though I grew up in a very, very busy household where you kind of had to shout to make yourself heard, you know, and it was a you know, a great household to grow up with. Yes, you know, I got ribbed, and there was the difficulties of being the youngest and stuff like that. And I think sometimes I might have,
and not very sporty.
Yeah, putting it mildly. And sometimes looking back on it, or not looking back is the wrong way to put it. Maybe as time's passed, I've kind of almost victimized myself more than I needed to. Do you get what I mean?
Go. What do you mean?
As in, like, so for many, many years, I'd kind of tell people, you know, like, I was the only geek in my house, and you know, there was an element of bullying is the wrong way to put it, but you know, my brothers were like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But looking back, and I think as I went on, I think I kind of, it mushroomed and it became much more of a thing in my head. Then I think the reality was far less than what I'd made it out to be in my own mind, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't think I realized that until probably after my dad died, by which time David had passed. So it was like just me, Danny, and Norman. And I think we used to have sort of Skype video calls like once a month or a couple of months, and now it's kind of turned into gaming sessions where we have like a gaming session sort of once a month. Everyone's on the PS4, but at the same time, that's how we catch up. We catch up whilst playing the game and stuff like that. But the more I talk to them about stuff, like, have you seen this? Have you seen that? Have you watched this Marvel film? Blah, the more I realized that a lot of those influences, certainly for Marvel, came from my older brothers came from Danny, who was probably the one that I would have firmly put at the opposite end of the scale.
Yeah, for real. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Knowing Danny.
You know, he never lost his love of Marvel. So when I told him I still had the Marvel comics, I've still got most of them that I'd got from the house or whatever. But he was proper chuffed. Do you know what I mean? That they were still there, you know?
So while we're there, favorite Marvel character, and has that changed in the last 30 years? Actually, forget Marvel character. Favorite superhero character then. Favorite comics.
Oh no, I can't do that, man.
All right, Marvel,
man, Marvel. Because I don't think I have a favorite character overall.
I suppose I don't mean favorite. I suppose I mean the one that's made the biggest mark on you.
I think it was probably Doctor Strange. I think it was probably Doctor Strange. I just loved that kind of, you know, I loved the way he talked. I loved he was just cool. Do you know what I mean? And he used to always sit cross-legged, floating in the middle of the room, drinking a cup of tea. And I don't know. Whilst he was reading the book, I liked that.
So how did the movies make you feel then?
I think the casting was good. He looked the part. I personally don't think he was my Doctor Strange until we hit Infinity War. Because there's a bit in Infinity War where Thanos rocks up and Doctor Strange is just sitting down chilling, and Thanos says something to him like, "Oh, we come to this at last," and he was like, "Well, it's brought you to me. You made a mistake because now you face the master of the mystic arts." And I almost stood up in the cinema. I was like, "That's how you do Doctor Strange." And then there's a bit where he kind of does some move where it's almost like he opens up his arms and suddenly there's hundreds of him coming out of him.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I would have got out of my chair. I was like, this is Doctor Strange. Finally, this is how you do Doctor Strange. And weirdly, when he's popped up in other things, he's worked better than he did in the Doctor Strange film.
Interesting, really interesting.
But I feel now they've got his measure, which has made me much more excited about
the multiverse of madness.
Yeah, because I kind of think when you watch the first Doctor Strange film, I sort of feel like they were almost too scared about how far to push magic. And it was almost like magic was basically martial arts with a little bit of sparkly stuff.
Yeah. And then they went into magical Tony Stark area.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, he just felt like a magic Tony Stark. Whereas when we got to Infinity War, he felt more like Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
He should be the smartest man in the room. Anyway, go.
No, I just want to move on a little bit and talk about. So in your introduction, I talked about your writing. So what inspired you to put pen to paper? And actually, you were drawing before you were writing, weren't you?
Yeah. Well, yes, I was. Yeah, I was drawing before I was writing. So for a long time, it's weird. For a long time, I always thought drawing was going to be my thing. You know, I thought I was going to become a cartoonist, or whatever. I just called it a cartoonist. I didn't really make the differentiations we get now.
Well, it's interesting because way back then, neither of us were really plugged into any extensive network of geekdom.
No, because there wasn't any.
I didn't even know it existed. But I remember when we first started going to cons, people were going, do you remember that thing there? And I was like, what thing? Was there a thing?
Yeah.
I didn't know. But anyway, yeah, back to drawing and into writing.
Yeah. So, so originally, my first kind of foray into creativeness was drawing. And I was quite happy doing that. And then I went to see Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean to sort of backtrack slightly, I think where it started really was I was sitting, I can remember it. I was having breakfast, Mum had the radio on, and the Raiders of the Lost Ark trailer came on the radio, but they'd done it like a cliffhanger. And it was like, will Indy escape from the pit of snakes? Will he find a Lost Ark of the Covenant? Find out when, Raiders of the Lost Ark hits screen.
Which is pure pulp sensibility.
Pure, something just, it was like Big Bang. Something just went off in my head. That moment, something just went off. And I was like, I have to see this film. No, it was something went off then. And then, you remember there was a show called Clapperboard back in the day? Yeah.
Wow.
They did. And Clapperboard was it was like for people who don't know, it was like a film program.
I'd forgotten about that.
I don't know if it was for kids or not. I can't remember. But they did a kind of special look at Raiders. This was before I saw the film. I don't think I even really talked about this bit of it much. And I was sitting watching it on my own. And all I remember, there was a bit with Indiana Jones, there's a bit of Harrison Ford, and he was on, you know, that cargo ship, called the Bantu Wind. And he was practicing with the whip, because basically any chance he got, he was practicing with the whip. And they'd done this sweeping kind of helicopter shot of him, and he had this big puffer jacket on. So he said, I don't know if it's because it was cold or to protect him, and he was swirling the whip around, like, lashing it. And I was just like, I've got to see this film. Got to see this film. And I begged, borrowed, you know what I mean, bribed my brother Norman to take me, because mum wouldn't let me go on my own. And yeah, I went to see that film, and it just blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind.
What was your feeling straight after the rolling end credits roll? How you feeling?
It was kind of indescribable, really, because I knew something had changed. I just knew something had changed, but I didn't know what, and I didn't know what to do about it. And then that was when, like, I think mum could just see that I was just anxious. I was running around that. Do you know what I mean? I was just like,
yeah.
I was always a bit of a mouthy kid, always a bit of a ball of energy anyway, but much more so than usual. And she had suggested, that I write something. She just said, just write something.
I didn't realize that was your mum that set you on that path.
Yeah.
So I just want to give props to your mum, because for someone who has got no interest in the genre, as most West Indian parents don't,
Yeah.
she found a particular genre accessible way to motivate you. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
It depends on I don't know what you're thinking.
Well, I'm basically, number one, I think the fact that she set you off on the writing thing, that's just kind of made me feel quite emotional. But also what she used to say to you every time you left the house.
Yeah, I thought that's what it was. So mum was a kind of, you know, mum was special. Mum was different. And we had this thing where I honestly, I don't know I couldn't tell you when it started or why it started. But what she actually used to say as well, she always used to say, because I'd have this real thing about when I left the house, that I always had to have my bag, my satchel.
Was that an indie thing?
No, part of that was because I'd actually pre-indie. I don't know if it was pre-indie or post-indie, but I'd fallen off a bus, and I'd landed, and basically my head hit the satchel. And if my head hadn't hit the satchel, I certainly would have been off the hospital, if not worse.
I didn't know that. What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my head hit the satchel. You know when you get in the going to school, you know, you get the whole,
and there's a little platform. There's a platform that was open.
Yes.
Good old days.
People used to wait, and they could jump off it, so it would get them closer to school.
Yeah.
And I was crowded in there, and I basically got kind of half shoved. It wasn't a malicious thing. It was just people jockeying for position, and I kind of lost my footing and basically like face planted the floor off the bus. But my head hit the satchel.
Okay.
So after that, I always had a satchel, and even to this day, I always have a rucksack. I always carry a rucksack with me, and that's why it's very rare you see me without some sort of rucksack or satchel.
Like some kind of origin story, man.
Yeah. So because of that, Mum always used to see me in the mornings like, right, where's my satchel? Right, I've got to get my satchel. And Mum always say, look on him, ready to save the world. Look at him. And I think from there it kind of went to her asking me like, where are you off to? And me saying I'm off to save the world. And she said that up until she passed, and I was in my 30s when she passed away. So yeah, it became a real. I guess it kind of became a bit of an anthem for me in the back of my mind. Does that answer you?
It does. No, I love that. I feel like I kind of forgot where I was going in the first place, which was what made you set pen to paper and the difference. So it was indie that sparked that need to do something.
Yes. Yeah. And I think what happened after that was more things came along.
Mm.
So it was almost like realizing what the feeling was. So it's kind of like when you've not eaten all day and you get that kind of hunger in your stomach that you need to get some food in you. It's a little bit like that's how my writing works. And that's why sometimes it takes me such a long time to write sometimes, because sometimes I go through these awful months, years of imposter syndrome and just depression or whatever. Either I see something, I read something, I listen to something, and that I get that hunger at the pit of my stomach where I'm like, I've got to write something. I've got no choice now. It's almost like, I don't know where the swearing is, so I'm not going to swear. It's almost like you know, stuff imposter syndrome, stuff you're scared, you're feared about page. You've got to get something down.
And you cut out a little bit, so can you tell me again, what is it that gets you from that kind of bout of depression, imposter syndrome, to the point where you can say, I've got to get up and keep going?
It is normally, like I said, it's normally when I've seen something or I've watched something, some show, or I've read some passage in a book or some line or something, and I'm like, I've got to get back on it. I've got to write something.
How do you feel then? Because part of the reason I'm doing this whole podcast is because, and maybe it's because I get a little bit angry, because I didn't expect it to still feel this way, but sometimes it still does. When you talk about your love of geek stuff and things, people kind of roll their eyes. And you've just told me that it's kind of the geek stuff that gets you up when you're down. How do you feel about the way that people kind of still look at kind of geeky stuff at the moment?
You know, sometimes it kind of bothers me, but by and large, it doesn't anymore. And I think it's because I don't feel the same. I don't feel that same need to be accepted as I did when I was younger.
Mm.
You know, maybe some of it is innate. I'm in my 50s now, so maybe that's some of it. Also, I don't feel that I need to share it with those people. Do you get what I mean? I know so many. I think, and obviously because of the podcast and stuff, I've come to know like hundreds, I guess.
You got your clan.
Yeah, of geeks that I could discuss stuff with now. You know, I can go on Facebook. You know, if I see a trailer, I can go on there. You know, I mean, there will be times like where I'm in Sue, bless her, my wife. You know, she loves watching the stuff that I watch.
You forgot the words long suffering before the word.
Yeah, long. Yeah, well, yeah, she'd add that in if she were here. But I mean, she loves all the kind of TV and stuff like that. She'll watch the Marvel films and stuff. But there's always a point where if I'm discussing something where I've lost her.
Okay, it's not just me then.
No, where she's kind of like, I'm not interested anymore, and she'll say,
I love Sue's honesty.
She'll just say, I'm not interested anymore, or you know, you're just boring me now because you made it weird now. Do you know what I mean? And that was the beauty of Geek Syndicate, because I could have those conversations with you, and then by extension with other people. I would say Geek Syndicate, with podcasting in general. That's been the beauty of podcasting, is because I can have those discussions to the nth degree with like-minded people, and that scratches that itch. So when I'm in work and people are maybe ragging on a geek, or they might see my trainers, or they might see something, go, oh, you're one of them geeks. I go, yeah, I am, yeah. And it rolls over me, because I don't need to justify why I'm into what I'm into. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Let's talk about another element of geekdom that a lot of people, and it's those people, ironically, it's the people that, you know, we don't feel that need to prove anything to. But I think a lot of those people won't see this as a geeky stuff, but music. Mm-hmm. Music in a show. What does that do for you? Where does that take you?
I mean, obviously, I know it's a podcast, so you already know the answer. But music for me is, I mean, I'd be lost without it.
And we're not talking pop music here, are we?
No. We're talking, you know, movie soundtracks. In fact, today I've been listening to the musical score for the new He-Man and the
Masters
Master
Universe.
Universe cartoon by good old Bear McCreary. So no, I absolutely adore soundtracks of any kind.
Why?
But primarily, you know what? I think I realized pretty early on that I wasn't being moved just by what I was seeing on the screen, but also by the music that I was hearing. And I definitely think Raiders hit that for me, as did Superman. And then sort of not Star Wars first time around, but definitely when we went to see Star Wars Empire on that double bill, when Empire got released,
Yeah.
and all the bits of Yoda, that because I think what it was is when I saw Raiders, you had that real anthemic dum dum dum, and it's loud and it's brassy and whatever. But I wasn't really being hit by the quiet stuff in the same way, although The Well of the Souls is amazing piece of music. But when we went to see Empire Strikes Back, and then you had Yoda's theme, and there's another one which is called Yoda and the Force, which is the bit where he's explained the Force to Luke, and then he levitates the X-wing. That's when I realized that I was like, oh, okay, this isn't the fast music. This is like a slower paced music, but this is doing.
Oh, right. So it's not even, because I know for me, you get to the end of Star Wars and I can't help but salute. And every time I hear that Star Wars theme, I want to salute. But you found your way to the smaller moments.
For me, it's always about the smaller moments. What I find weirdly, as when I started off with like my love of music, it was the bigger stuff. So for Star Wars, it would have been the main fanfare. But now, if you had to tell me like where some of my faves, it would be the quieter stuff, the Yoda's theme, Princess Leia's theme. There's another, I think it's the one where Obi-Wan talks about the Force for the first time, and there's a brilliant piece in the final battle where Luke is flying down the trench and the music is blaring and dun, 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 and then it goes quiet and then the Force theme comes in, and that's when Obi-Wan is telling him to kind of like use the Force, and then it lasts for a few seconds, and it's and then the minute Luke is like, right, this is what I'm going to do, we're back to the and it's kicking it again, and it's those what I love is transitions. I love that transitions from the quieter moments to like the big moments.
And so soundtracks and stuff, is this something you put on a playlist like other, I can say like normal people, like normal people would have whatever, Foo Fighters or whatever I'm not into the Foo Fighters, but people might have a favorite band or whatever. Do you put on sort of geek soundtracks?
Yeah. My I have a Notes from New Spotify list. I also tend to have a playlist for the book that I'm working on.
Okay.
So when I still am working on it. So the current book I'm writing is set in the 80s. So this was a bit of a departure for me because I had a lot of pop music in there, 80s pop music.
Right.
As well as 80s genre films and TV shows were in there. Just to kind of, it wasn't just because I knew this world was going to be set in the 80s, I needed to kind of immerse myself a bit in it as I was writing in it. And I thought the best way to do that was music of its time. And certainly when I was a kid in the 80s, I listened to a lot of kind of pop music and stuff like that. So I knew the music that would kind of evoke the mood, and I wanted to do that for the characters. So I tend to do that. I have a kind of playlist for the books.
Okay, before we get on to what you're writing at the moment, do you have a suggestion for people to go listen to, soundtrack wise, music wise?
Wow, that's
or even, okay, let's do it another way. I was going to say what's your favorite, what's your favorite, but I was going to guess that was indie.
Oh, indie. I don't necessarily know if I have a top favorite. I mean, indie's pretty much up there because I think I have favorite tracks as opposed to like favorite albums.
Gotcha.
Go
on, give us a track then.
The Raiders.
Someone said to you, I haven't listened to any. I don't listen to music. Where should I start?
I mean, sorry, at the same time, I'm just looking at my cat. I'm hoping my cat's not about to be sick. So if I suddenly disappear, it's because I've had to
I
run the
hear you,
cat
man.
upstairs.
I hear you, man.
You can't go wrong with the Raiders much.
Yeah.
But what I would say to people is make sure you get the proper Raiders much, because there's a shorter version. You need to have the Raiders much, which has Marion's theme running in the middle of it, because that's the one where you have and then it goes dun, 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 dun. That's what I'm all about, man. That transitioning.
Right.
Also the metal march or metal ceremony room, I think it is, from
Star Wars.
From Star Wars.
Yeah, man.
Just
that's where I can't sit down. I have to start. I could be on my own, or it could just be me and my wife, and I'll be standing up saluting at that point. I literally can't help it.
Yeah. But thirdly, I got to say this: the Unbreakable soundtrack by James Newton Howard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
As a whole soundtrack, that's worthy.
Cool. So what are you working on now, writing wise, and what brought you to that place?
So what I'm working on at the moment is a middle grade fiction book. So this will be aimed at 8 to 12-year-olds, and it's called Trail of the Cursed Cobras. And it's I've kind of described it as Grange Hill meets Raiders of the Lost Ark. So if people don't know, because obviously I know we have American listeners on GS subs who they may listen to this. So people that know, Grange Hill was it was a kids drama series set in a comprehensive school back in the 80s. And it did go on for quite a while. I don't know if it stopped in the 90s, maybe it might have gone to the 2000s. I don't know. But certainly when we were watching it, it was back in the 80s. And yeah, it was set in a London comprehensive school with the likes of Tucker Jenkins and Benny Green.
Tucker Jenkins.
So you got that.
No,
and
wait. Sorry, I've just looked it up. It started in 1978.
Yeah.
I must be missing something because it says final episode date was 2008.
Yeah, I thought it did go on for a while.
Wow, that's mad.
Yeah.
Okay, and apparently the opening theme is called Chicken Man. I didn't know that.
Didn't know that. So it was. It's basically a kind of a love letter to the 80s and the films and TV shows that I grew up with and stuff. And also it's kind of, I hate to use the term like autobiographical, but it kind of has, I guess it kind of has elements of my younger life and some of my friends' younger lives. And the main reason for that isn't because I wanted to kind of do something autobiographical, because it's not. I mean, it is a straight up adventure story, but it was because when I was first approached to write a piece of middle grade fiction, my first thought was, I don't know how to write middle grade fiction. And I was all set to turn the idea completely down. And what Sue had said to me was, write what you know. She said, just write what you know. And I thought about it, and I thought the only kids that I remember was me being a kid and what it was like being a kid in the 80s. And I know that we'd got up to some slightly different hijinks, which had a kind of tinge to the supernatural term. So I thought, what if I took that and then kind of expanded it, and rather than it being...
What amazes me is that sentence is completely true.
Yeah. But making the supernatural in the actual book be real. That because some of the situations pretty much happened. One particular sequence pretty much happened almost word for word, except for the fact there's a much more heavy supernatural element aimed at it.
Yeah.
So that answer. Oh, in terms, sorry, you were asking that how I came to. Yeah. Basically, I was approached by an agent who had read some other stuff and wanted me to have a crack at writing middle grade fiction because the main reason she had approached me was because she'd given me this crazy stat which had said like, I don't know, 1% of all children's authors were black men. It's something silly like that.
Wow.
Or it might have been 1% was sort of people of color, like leading characters or whatever. And that was her reasoning for her approaching me. But go on.
I was going to say, what I'm more interested in actually is what is it? So, I mean, given the themes that you're playing with it, then what has it meant to you to be writing something like that? Has it been an easy journey, an exciting journey, or quite a meditative one? Where's that taken you?
All three. I think I've kind of run the gamut of emotions, because it's weird, because I listened to an interview with my editor, who's Dion, and he kind of spoke about us briefly during his interview about our kind of working relationship on it. And he said he realized when he coming into it for our first meeting after he'd read the book, that how personal it was to me. And this is the most personal thing I've ever written in many ways, because there are elements of my own sort of life upbringing in there, and a lot of it is kind of centered around one of the kids. You know, he's lost his mum, but yet can still hear his mum's voice talking to him.
Yeah.
And it's that the whole thing is whether or not is he imagining it, or actually is it his mum. And obviously I'd lost my mum, not at that age, it was obviously many years later, but it was something that I still do. I actually, you know, mum's very present in the house. We often talk about mum in the house. If something happens, I go, oh, that was mum, or Sue will say, oh, that was your mum. That was, you know, normally if something bad's happened when I should have been doing something else, she's like, that's your mum, you know. So I think that was where the idea kind of sprung from, and then it kind of sort of moved that from there. So it's been, and it's been the most fun as well. It's been the most fun I've had writing, because the last sort of two books, I've still got one book to do, the trilogy, but they've been fun. But the second book was quite dark, maybe in some ways darker than I would have probably had it. But I think it was because I'd lost two people through as I was writing that book,
and fairly quickly in relation to each other.
fairly, and I think that kind of set me on a bit of a path, and it comes out through, and I think it's something that Neil Gaiman says was kind of like, you know, if you've lost a loved one, or you're going through things, blah blah blah, you know, all you can do is make art, you know. So
yeah.
I think that's kind of what's certainly spurred me on, and I think this has been one of the books I've been working on where that's kind of not really been the case. So I've been able to have a much lighter tone with everything, and because it is middle grade, yeah, there's some darker elements to it, but my tone's got to be lighter just because of the age group I'm trying to hit. And I don't know. We'll see. You know, when it comes out, I don't know if I've done that. I don't know how kids are going to find it. I don't know how parents are going to find it. But I've had a blast with it.
Cool. So just to round off, I'm really looking forward to. I mean, I've already read was it the first draft I read?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And I am now. I might be slightly biased because there are things I recognised in it. But I just think this book is it's a good romp, but there's a real depth to it as well. And I'm a huge fan of the book already, and I'm really looking forward to it getting out there. So I'll be telling people. So to finish off, could you? I'm not really sure what I'm asking here, but it's something along the lines of, could you sum up succinctly the role of geekdom in your life from childhood to adulthood to a man who's 50 plus years? I mean, is it possible to do that?
I think as Doctor Who has like two hearts, I guess if I had two hearts, I guess my second heart would be geekdom.
Damn.
And you know, without and I need both hearts to keep me going. Do you know what I mean? Because there are very much two sides to my personality. I even went through a phase where I did literally kind of pretend to myself that whenever I took my glasses off, I was different.
Mm-hmm.
And it was weird because what I realized was, and it sounds really stupid, I didn't realize it until we started doing podcasts. What I realized was, like, me without my glasses was the disguise, and
Right.
me with my glasses, embracing my geekdom, that's the superpowered version of me. That's the Superman. That's the super
Yeah.
Barry. You know, and a lot of people don't see. Other geeks do, but a lot of people don't see that side of me. A lot of people look at me and they don't see that side, so they're completely shocked when they learn that I'm into these things or I do these things. So
Do you think maturity has been the merging of those two hearts?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think I very much I embrace it much more now, and I realize there's a lot of strength in drawing on that I didn't necessarily realize before, and I didn't even realize that it was geekdom by and large that was kind of like getting me through hard times. Obviously, other people, and you get support and stuff, but it's in those quiet, desperate moments where you're on your own. It's it is that kind of what would Indy do? He'd just get back up, or what would David Dunn do? And it's those sorts of questions you kind of constantly ask yourself, I guess, as a geek going through emotional stuff.
B, thanks for taking the time with us today. If you want more of the banter that you saw between me and Barry, then make sure to check out the Geek Syndicate podcast, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
You can find me at the moment. You can get all the information about what I do at unseenshadows.com. I will be launching my very first own website, which will be barrynugent.com.
Nice. But thanks for your honesty and for sharing with us today, B. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Barry. I mean, for me, the reason we started our podcast, the Geek Syndicate, 15 years ago was because we just enjoyed spending time with each other. We enjoyed chatting about the things that we loved together. It was a great opportunity to do that. And so for me, this is just more of the same, actually, but to actually not just talk about those things we love, but to explore what they really, really mean to us it was a great opportunity. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. So in these epilogues, I like to try and work out what it is that I got from this interview as with the passage of time. I always give it a little while. There's a couple of things. So Barry wrote this a few days after. He said, and he put it on Facebook, I've always believed every creative person has a special power all of their own. It's taken me over 50 years and being interviewed by David Montieth for his new podcast to realize what mine is. I get back up. Number one, I just think that's brilliant. There's a testament to resilience there. But more than that, for me, it's a huge win because this is what I want this podcast to be about. I do not believe in art for art's sake. I believe that everything you do has to serve humanity in some way. So what I want to get out of this, I want to leave this podcast enriched. I want my guests to leave enriched. I don't want them to feel like they've just come on and sold their product and left. I want them to feel like they've got something out of it. And I want the listener to as well. And the fact that Barry has got something out of it, that is what this is about. This is a big win for the Naked Geek as far as I'm concerned. That's what it's about. But then I had a number of thoughts as well as I contemplated this epilogue, and I was trying to work out what they were. And as time has gone by, I hope it kind of correlates to what's gone before in this interview, in this chat. It's not an interview, it's a chat. But I think for me, and I've now read the Trail of the Cursed Cobras, and it's awesome. It's so damn good. It's some of his best work, and you can see him maturing as a writer blatantly. But one of the things I get from the chat we had was how Barry has, and I know that he has struggled with the deaths that he's experienced and found them hard, and they've kind of put him into certain places. But you read this, you read other things, you listen to what he said, and there's a certain ability he has found to be able to incorporate those deaths into his creativity. Granted, that may have taken a leave of absence, but he's found another way in, and he's incorporated into his characters, into his writing. It is part of who he is, and he's allowed that to come out in what he does. And I think there's something beautiful and there's something healthy and as healthy as it is traumatic about that. And I have nothing but respect and admiration or honor for what he's done. So cheers for coming on, B. It was a pleasure. And I hope you all enjoyed it. And I hope to see you, I hope to hear you next week for the next episode of The Naked Geek in My Boudoir. I'm going to ask you one favor, and that favor is that if you would consider donating, then you'll find the link in the show notes. Because I'm really trying to make this podcast as accessible as it can be. And if I could get money to have someone to sort of do the transcripts, correct the transcripts, and even perhaps do a video version with a signer, that would be brilliant. But none of those things come cheaply. So if you feel that you can help towards that, then please do check out the link for my Ko-fi page in the show notes. So until next time, I'm David Montieth, the Naked Geek.